this is the day that Eagle fans everywhere have been waiting for. So we'll get into what you need to look for at Eagles training camp with NFL insider Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast. Like, subscribe, and download wherever you get your podcasts. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. Hope you're doing well. And, yeah, like always, Josh, almost always, the Eagles usually sign a player or two, some veterans, just for depth purposes. We'll get into that move. The Eagles made one today, which I thought was interesting, but you don't want to read into anything. It means, you can't. It's a depth issue, but a depth signing, we'll explain it. We talked about this for a couple of months about what they might do at edge. But, yeah, we're there. I mean, they got the conditioning test. Their first practice is tomorrow. They only practice during the week 2 days. They just practice Wednesday and Thursday, walk through Friday, then practice on Saturday.
So one of the things that we know about is when players show up to camp, they're not always in the condition that the team wants, right? And I know that there are tons of stories out of that you can give, not just with the Eagles, but with many teams, about players showing up to camp, the team being like, hey, buddy, maybe you need to maybe work on this a little bit, right?
Right. So I'm going to say 3 years ago, we had a note on Inside the Birds that Joey Mailata was too heavy at OTAs, and he was told to slim down. He lost about 25 pounds in about 6 weeks, and that's an example of it. You know, you tell a player based on what he looks like and what he weighs, and they gave him a goal weight, and he reached it rather easily. So then you've got the situations where players are told to gain weight, put mass on their frame. Jay Alexander was told that, and we'll see. That's one of the things I look at, Josh, when I go to camp is I look at size. I look at, if they put something on their body, do they need to put weight on? Because you can tell sometimes. I mean, I remember I'll give you an obscure player named Alex McAllister. If you're a real Eagles fan, you'll remember him. He was.
I remember him, defensive end.
You got it. He was an edge rusher from, I believe, Florida?
Yep,
or
Florida.
State? Florida, okay. Howie Roseman School. So he looked so thin he couldn't even fill his jersey out. I'm like, there's no way this guy's going to make it, and he didn't. There's sometimes you could tell, like, this guy's going to have a problem, or if a guy looks too slow, you look for that stuff. So in terms of what I look for, and plus we'll give the fans who are going to go to NovaCare, that's where practices are, plus the one practice at the Link. If you're able to go, season ticket holders and invited guests. The guests are typically business clients and their families and so forth. But if you're able to go see them, I would look for this kind of stuff. Is the guy bigger than you thought, smaller than you thought, and stuff like that?
For you, Adam, when you look at over the years, obviously that's a big part of the day one of camp. So obviously what the fans don't really know about that as much. So for you, when you're looking at it as someone who's covering the team, what is something that needs to be with the depth chart you need people to look at?
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything to me in OTAs. You make a note of it, but it doesn't really mean anything. It definitely means something, not so much the first day. It's at the first 2 weeks progress. You start to see rotations. You get to see who's running with the first, second, and third teams. There are generally 3 teams on offense and defense. And then every once in a while, if they have too many players, they'll have a 4th team. Those poor players, they're almost certainly not going to make it. Although Corey Clement in 2017, I remember him running with the 4th team initially. They moved him up very quickly because I remember taking that note, to the 3rd team, then the 2nd team, and as you know what happened, what an unbelievable story Corey Clement was. Eagles would not have won a Super Bowl without him. Let's call it like it is. Believe this or not, they wouldn't have won that Super Bowl. You know what he did in that game against New England? He was incredible. He had a great season. But so I really do look at that. I look at where guys are lined up. Also, Josh, we'll talk about in a minute. But it's really, to me, what's the rotation look like? Who's working with the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd teams? But also what we do see, and we do see this in OTAs even more, the first day is not a direct indication of what will happen in season, because the next day they may work out, they may rotate, they may put someone else with the first team. So you don't want to overdo it. But after a week and a half, that's when you could say, you know what, I think we kind of learned something. We know who's going to be with the first team.
So with Adam Caplan, NFL insider at Caplan NFL on the X platform, of course, Inside the Birds podcast. Like, subscribe, and download wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to Inside the Birds on YouTube as well. Adam, you mentioned about where players line up. This is always an interesting conversation because, as you said, people have opinions and ideas and theories about what guys are going to do. But then when you actually see them on the field running those 7-on-7s and those other 11-on-11 situations, that creates a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah, so like offensively, okay, where's Miles Hinton going to line up? Who's a 6th-round pick out of Michigan? He can play left or right tackle. So we'll look for that in training camp. Where's Terrace Marshall? Now, these are backups, but Terrace Marshall, is he going to play? He's better outside than he is inside, but how do they use him? Who's he play behind? A running back, is Will Shipley going to be used on 3rd down? If so, let's see how he does in pass protection. Although you're not really allowed to block very much during the 5-day acclimation period, but let's see what happens with him. But defensively, it's where it's at, Josh. What's the rotation look like? Where are they going to line up Ty Robinson, number 95, in training camp, is the 4th-round pick from Nebraska who they're very high on? When you look at the secondary, what's the rotation going to be at cornerback? And also, when we talk about where a guy's going to line up, where's Mac McWilliams going to line up? Now, the Eagles drafted him to mostly be nickel, but he can play outside. Are they going to use Drew Makuba, who's a safety but could play nickel because he did play it in college? Is he just a safety or does he play nickel? We didn't really talk a lot about that in the offseason, but it's something we were going to keep an eye on. By the way, where does Cooper DeJean? Is he only going to be a nickel? Will he play corner? Vic Fangio did say in base he probably will line him up. They only played base defense about 10 snaps per game. But let's see. I mean, that's the thing that I like to see. In OTAs, there's a lot of experimentation, so I don't put a lot of stock into it. But when you do something in training camp, it's generally deliberate. It's something that you're definitely considering, and I'm looking forward to seeing that this week and next week.
And by the way, Vic Fangio speaks on Thursday this week. And I remember last year, Adam, Fangio's been very open last year and this year about what he's going to do with guys. So you mentioned about DeJean. Yep. He is going to tell you what he likes and doesn't like sometimes about some of these guys, where they are lining up. Speaking of the players, how about player development, Adam? Yeah. Who are guys to have an eye on who from maybe last year to this year might be improving, might be regressing? What are you looking for in that department?
All right, let's start on offense at receiver. Danny Gray is a guy we've talked about on Inside the Birds since he's been here. A former 3rd-round pick for the Niners, who's maybe the fastest receiver they have on the team. We really want to see if he could contribute because their first 3 spots on the depth chart are set. After that, no one's assured of a job. So he's a guy we want to see because he didn't really play last year very much. And then Anai Smith, who was a non-factor last season, who's a slot receiver, returner, and manufactured touch player, who I know they were very excited about. He wasn't ready last year due to the foot problems. We want to see how he's developed. Certainly. And then Will Shipley, number 28, who's going to have a bigger role than he did last year. We want to see how he has developed going from 1 year to year 1 to year 2. That's a big deal, Josh. Defensively, Byron Young, who never played for the Eagles last season, he was claimed off waivers from the Raiders. The guy was a 3rd-round pick. Let's see if he can play. Gabe Hall, who had a good offseason, number 96, undrafted free agent who the Eagles gave a big practice squad guaranteed to last year. This is a guy who's got elite length, but that's about it. Is he a player? Well, we're going to find out. Inside backer Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Josh. Right now, he should be working with the ones. We'll learn more this week. He should be the guy who lines up mostly opposite Bond. We want to see how he develops. And in the secondary, it's obviously, this is the big one, and we'll get to edge in a second. Keely Ringo, like for the second straight offseason, it's looked good. And then in OTAs only, we know what happened last year. He could not build on the really good OTAs last year. He struggled for the first week of training camp. And really Isaiah Rodgers beat him out for that 3rd job. So can Ringo put it together? It's a big year for him. And then at edge, this is a major one with Jalen Hunt. By the way, this is something we're going to talk about on tomorrow's show. In addition to and I'll mention this player that they signed in a minute. But the player development on defense is so big because Josh, you're going to have a minimum of 5 new starters on that side of the football.
Yeah, of course, obviously, that development is extra important, not just because of new players, Adam, because these are young players as
Right.
well. These are not, tons of vested veterans all over the place. The Eagles had, I believe, was the 9th youngest roster in the NFL last year. Adam, speaking of the positions, camp battles, you mentioned Will Shipley earlier. Let's start with the number 2 running back spot.
Yeah, this is a big one, Josh. It's not that A.J. Dillon can't play on third down. That's just not what he does. And with Kenny Gainwell, who was their best pass protector for the past 3 seasons, not on the roster, he's now with Pittsburgh, although we're told the Eagles actually tried to re-sign him. But the money was similar. It was a little bit more with Pittsburgh. But the Eagles really like Shipley. He's more explosive than Gainwell. So we're going to learn early on what Will Shipley's role is going to be. So, but the number 2 job's open. Now, we expect Dillon to be that guy when Barkley can't play to handle a lot of carries. But you know what? A.J. Dillon's got to show he can still play. We don't know that yet. Right guard, everybody knows that job's up for grabs. It's Tyler Steen's job to lose. Safety, is Drew Makuba going to be ready to start over Sidney Brown? We think that's going to happen. That's going to be that answer, but he's got to go get it. And then corner, obviously, Ringo versus Adoree Jackson. That's the battle. That's the biggest battle on defense. And then edge, it's just that, Josh, is Azeez Ojulari going to be ready to be that third edge? And then is Jalen Sutton ready to be full-time? And what's the rotation going to look like? That'll work itself out in training camp. And I do want to mention, we'll talk about the roster moves that they made in a minute, but just overall, Josh, there are a lot of questions on defense because, look, they had the best defense in football last year statistically. They were great, way better than anyone could have believed they could be. And now they've had so much change. There are questions on that side of the football.
You mentioned the move they made just today. So for those who didn't see the news, not a crazy signing, but at least it's an interesting signing, at least from my perspective. Adam Caplan, NFL Insider, the final one for you. I'm going to try to say this name. I might mispronounce it, but I believe what I saw was the pronunciation was Ogbo Okoronkwo. Is that correct?
Yeah, Obo's his nickname, I'm told. So, yeah.
Well, that's so much easier.
Yeah, I always know these obscure things. So what happened with him was he was drafted by the Rams. It didn't work out. He signs with the Texans as a sub-package rusher. He does really well. So then, Josh, he signs a 3-year deal as a free agent with the Browns for worth about $19 million. It's really good backup edge money, okay, Obo. And it just doesn't work out. Now, they stuck with him because the first 2 years, a lot of the money was guaranteed. He signed – it was one of these things where, like, they weren't going to give up on him because there was just too much money that he was owed. So they stuck by him. It didn't work. He wasn't bad, but just he wasn't good as they thought he should be. They couldn't justify paying him this funnier, so they cut him. So this is a smart signing. We would settle off season. Eagles don't have to do anything at edge, but they really could use one more guy. Remember, Josh, you need to have 3 teams on each position. You got to have depth. We know it's Smith and Hunt, then Ojulari and Uche. The third team is Powell Ryland, and then Patrick Johnson's really not an edge rusher. He's a special teams player who could play edge if you need him. KJ Henry was cut on Tuesday. He's a guy that was drafted by Washington, but he wasn't going to make the team. O'Shawn Mathis is a former Rams draft pick. The Eagles signed him last year. They were taking a look at him. But here's the problem, Josh, because if Jahad Campbell was ready, different story. They wouldn't need to do anything. Yes, they're going to cross-train him eventually. He's going to start at inside backer, start off once he's cleared in August to practice. But had he never had surgery, they wouldn't need us because then he'd be able to play both. But right now they don't know if he'll be an inch this season because they got to see how he handles inside backer first. So they really did need one more guy. Another position which we expect them to address at some point. I could not give you a timeline. Inside backer. If you think the Phillies bullpen is paper thin before David Robertson signing, Josh, the Eagles are even thinner at inside backer. They could barely line up. They could technically line up with 3 teams in training camp, but barely, Josh, and that's a position. By the time the preseason starts, they're probably going to have to do something.
He's NFL Insider Adam Caplan at Caplan NFL on the X platform. Inside the Birds is the podcast. InsideTheBirds.com is the website. like, subscribe, and download wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget about the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Adam, great stuff today. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.